Today's episode is brought to you by Forvis Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese couldn't be clearer. He wants to ban credit card surcharges. But that could have a profound impact on the small business bottom line. So, the Australian Restaurant and Cafe Association has gone into battle at a special inquiry. CEO Wes Lambert says a ban would be devastating for small cafes and restaurants. Wes describes the problem to Jeff Waters.
So it's actually related to credit card surcharging and merchant fees. The RBA and then the ACCC have opened an inquiry into credit card surcharging, which is totally legal in Australia, as long as you're just passing on your true costs for your merchant fees, but are banned in many countries and states around the world. The RBA has opened an inquiry into how credit card surcharges are charged, what businesses are doing it, and ultimately if they will continue. But also at the same time, they're also looking into the actual cost of debit and credit card transactions, because there apparently have been some differences between what big businesses pay per transaction and what small businesses pay per transaction, where the risk is actually on the card itself, not necessarily the type of business that you're going into. So ultimately, they're looking at, is it fair? Are the banks being fair to big and small businesses, and is it a level playing field? But also ensuring that least cost routing becomes the norm rather than the exception, which will decrease the total cost to consumers and small businesses, which could potentially add a significant amount to the bottom line.
So what's the main thing that you will be arguing for in this inquiry?
To ensure that surcharges don't get banned. Not only would that be devastating to small cafes and restaurants that, according to Ibis World, only have 4 to 5% profit margin. Imagine if they had to absorb 1 to 2% of almost all of their sales. Well, if they're only making 4 to 5% profit, that could wipe 1 to 2% off their bottom line, which can be 20 to 50% of what they're making now. So it would have a devastating effect. And also, if they did absorb merchant fees and increase prices in order to make the same bottom line, then it would be less transparent to the consumer, and also would lead to menu price inflation, which would continue to add to the existing inflation that we have now.
There's always a next step for your business, so grow with clarity and confidence with Forvis Mazars, supporting you every step of the way. Move forward with Forvis Mazars. Visit forvismazars.com/au. That's FORVISMAZARS.com/au.
Is there anything that individual restaurant owners or caterers who agree with you could be doing themselves?
Oh, look, ultimately, it's about following the rules and ensuring that you correctly display the merchant fees that you do pass on to consumers. And also, that it's really important to communicate that you're not making any money on the transaction. It is just what your providers charge you to transact in your private business. At the beginning of the argument, there were many individuals out there saying that you should be able to access your money for free. I agree with that wholeheartedly. We agree with that wholeheartedly. There are lots of places for you to access your money for free, and they're called banks and bank ATMs because they make money on your money. So therefore, they can allow you to access your money for free. But when you walk into a private business, that private business has to pay for you to access your money. It isn't a free service in those locations. Much like pre-2007, when 90% of transactions in restaurants were cash, if you needed cash in order to transact in that restaurant, oftentimes that restaurant would have a private ATM on site, or there would be a private ATM in the precinct. And you would have to pay a pretty hefty merchant fee to that private ATM in order to access your cash. So it is never free to access your own money unless you are in a bank or a bank ATM.
I suppose what I'm asking is, if a listener who owns a restaurant or catering business and feels very strongly about this, is there any way that that individual can support you in your lobbying efforts?
Oh, absolutely. They can join ARCA. They can go to arca.org.au, join, and their voice will be in the fight.
So what I'm hearing is that you would strongly prefer people just to use cash. Is there a campaign to be had there?
No, actually, we appreciate that consumers are going to be using debit and credit cards. We just want to make sure that the additional costs of doing that are not borne by small businesses, not only because the small business can't absorb that, but also because the government also charges a credit card surcharge. In the early days of the inquiry, it was discovered that even the ATO charges a credit card surcharge.
My word.
So ultimately, it's even big businesses do pass on the cost.
But fundamentally, it sounds like a battle here between a very, very, very large number of small businesses and a very small number of large banks. Surely we have numbers on our side.
I think that is the case.
So is that an advantage in the lobbying space?
Oh, look, it can be. Ultimately, with so many businesses, the voice can be very loud, but it is important to understand that the RBA and the ACCC are going to go through a process where they consult with everyone to ensure that, whatever the final outcome is, that it's relatively fair for all parties.
That was Wes Lambert, CEO of the Australian Restaurant and Cafe Association. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Forvis Mazars. To find out more, visit forvismazars.com/au. That's FORVISMAZARS.com/au.